Would you pick Ben Dunk out of a lineup? It's okay if you can't. Ben Dunk is a name of a cricketer more than the reality of one. Have you seen one of his big innings? It's doubtful. Have you seen two of them? Very unlikely. If you've seen three, there is a 44% chance that you are Ben Dunk. But like a cricketing Forrest Gump, he turns up everywhere. Ben Dunk has played in a lot of leagues. If you were to say what the four strongest leagues are, well, if I was to say what the four strongest leagues are, you'd say international cricket, IPL, PSL and CPL. Well, Dunk done them all. And yet, he's not a star. He's not even that close to a star. He's not star adjacent. But while Ben Dunk probably shouldn't be a star, he is one of the world's most fascinating cricketers. When he started destroying big bash attacks, Gideon Haigh referred to the Ben Dunkisation of Australian cricket. But that might be underselling it. I think we've had a Ben Dunkisation of the world game. Welcome to Bendunkistan. Ben Dunk is not an outlier or a pioneer. He's a sign of the times. His cricket has followed the path of our game. Ben Dunk is not the face of modern cricket, but maybe he's a kidney or a calf muscle. I haven't thought this through. It's important to know that Ben Dunk used to be a normal cricketer type cricketer. He was the son of a banana farmer from Innisfail, Queensland, and he was always big, but he had a normal cricketer's body. And he played all formats of the game, and when he batted, he played proper cricket shots. Look at this shot. That's a proper cover drive. Everything is where it is supposed to be, elbow-wise. His blade, right behind the ball. It's nice, but it's not just a shot. Look at his body. It looks like a normal young batsman's body. This is from 2011. The Big Bash League did not even exist then. This is him only 3 years later. Now it's an open-face slice drive. The perfect elbow is deformed. The face of the bat is nowhere. And it's veering off into a gap by any means necessary. And this is Ben Dunk in 2019. He's massive. If it wasn't for the fact they were smiling at each other, you'd be afraid that Ben Dunk is about to rip off Seb Gotch's arm. That physical and technical transformation is what has happened to the game. Batsmen used to be small. In the 90s, we used bowlers as pinch hitters because they were the stronger ones. That's no longer the case. Batsmen are now power hitters, and Ben Dunk is one of them. Ben Dunk was normal in 2011, and he is normal now. It's just that the normals have changed. Let's do a pointless thought experiment of a world where there is no T20, but there still is a man called Ben Dunk. He was okay at first class cricket and marginally better at one day domestic, but he wouldn't have been anywhere near an Australian player. His list A record is pretty ordinary. Wait, what is that? A double 100 in list A cricket, you say? I mean, the bowling attack here is not great, and it's pretty obvious that it was a flat pitch, what with Queensland just casually chasing this down. But maybe if he'd put his mind to it, he could have pushed for an ODI place. But really, I think he would have been a cult figure in domestic cricket and little more. As a first-class player, he has a decent record. He averaged 30, which is okay for a keeper. The only problem is he only kept in 6 of his 43 matches, so I suppose 30 is not okay. But in his second last season of first-class cricket, he opened the batting and he made 190 against Victoria, who were in the middle of a three-peat of Sheffield Shields. That's also the last year he ever played first-class cricket. That wouldn't have happened in the past, but T20 does exist, and it has changed things. So he hasn't played a List A game since 2017 either. But at least he's played. Nicholas Perrin has played only 3 first-class games in his entire career, and you know who he is. That's how weird the cricket world is now. So we need to talk about 2014, because everything that happened to Ben Dunk happened that year. Prior to this, Ben Dunk had played 3 seasons of the Big Bash, 2 before it was a league for Queensland, and 1 for the Sydney Thunder. In total, it was 16 games, barely a season in some competitions, and it's a 10th of a Major League Baseball season. That first season changed his trajectory, but his 4th season, after missing the previous year through injury, changed his entire life. Ben Dunk was player of the tournament, and the whole thing just kind of took off. That year he started with Hobart, but then he went off to Mumbai and played 3 games for the Mumbai Indians. That followed with a CPL gig with the sadly forgotten Antigua Hawksbills. Then back to India for the Champions League. and he finished 2014 for Australia playing against South Africa. By the end of 2013, Bendunkistan had played only 18 T20 matches. In 2014, he played 31. And the man who started the year by big bashing ended the year in a Bendunkistan funk. So his huge breakout year, when he changed his entire life, he ended up averaging 24 with a strike rate of 120. So the big 2014 was really 9 Big Bash games. So how does all this happen? Well, the Big Bash is televised around the world. And we have been brainwashed to believe that Australian cricketers are better, well, because of all the winning they have done. And we play so little T20 that 9 games feels like a lot. And almost every franchise in the world has an Australian working for them, as a coach, as a manager, as a something. The most important thing to note here is that 9 games is not a lot. Kieron Pollard has played the most T20s of anyone in the world, and if he was a baseballer, he'd have played in less than 4 seasons. What baseballers call a slump, we call a season. And so Bendunkistan's good 9 games would prove to be little more than a flare-up. But because of the way that T20 works, suddenly he's big time. But when you look at his career Big Bash record and what he has done overall, it's clear that Bendunkistan is just a good T20 player with incredible highs where he not only makes a lot of runs, but very fast. And then all the years in between where he doesn't make many, and quite often slowly. But together he's somewhere around just better than average. But that's not how T20 markets work. So that one season was so good that it spawned an entire higher level career. And while that is great for him, well done Bendunkistan, it also shows how immature and silly T20 cricket is. Just to highlight this further, in the NBA to make a trade, the salaries have to be compatible. There is a few reasons for this, but one of them is to make sure that the competitive balance remains. But the NBA is an old and legitimate league. Most T20 leagues aren't that legitimate. You don't have proper drafts, long-term contracts, or transfer fees. There are also leagues that pay players for commentary or promotional purposes, making the salary cap largely pointless. Oh, and yes, I do have a Bendunkistan example of this. In the 2013-14 season, Bendunkistan played for the Hobart Hurricanes. He made 395 runs, averaging 44 at a strike rate of 146. He was named player of the tournament. But he slumped the next 2 years when he didn't make that many runs combined. And Bendunkistan wanted to move on, and Hobart were eyeing off a then unknown and unsigned Darcy Short to open the batting in his place. So they made a trade for Bendunkistan with Hamish Kingston, meaning Dunk went to the Adelaide Strikers. If you haven't heard of Hamish Kingston, that's okay. Very few people on the face of this planet have heard of Hamish Kingston. He was a 26-year-old journeyman cricketer who before that season had played 1 T20 match where he bowled 2 overs. Then Hurricanes cricket manager Andrew Dykes said, "Hamish is a wonderful death bowler who performed really well at the most recent Matador Cup." The Matador Cup is a one-day competition, not a T20 competition. For the Hobart Hurricanes, in the 16-17 season, Kingston bowled 3 overs in the death, and he hasn't played a T20 match since that season. In that 2016-27 season that Dunk was traded to Adelaide, he was the highest run scorer in the Big Bash and was striking at 164. But here's the thing, and I wrote about this at the time, and no one else really did. Bendunkistan can be the best player in the league, traded for an unknown, and no one cares. T20 cricket lives in this ecosystem outside of normal professional sports, where what they do matters only while you're watching it. Once it's over, no one cares. Let me put it this way for you. Damien Martin once hit a ball to cover when Australia were chasing a low total against South Africa in a test match. The entire nation negged him until he almost became a travel agent. Bendunkistan made 113 runs in an entire Big Bash and was traded for a random, and no one noticed. I'm not an expert in PSL memes, but I am aware of their existence, and not just this guy. But I am part of modern cricket and did kind of give birth to cricket Twitter, or at least was there when it gave birth to itself. I don't understand how these things work. So I've seen cricket go viral since Jacques Rudolph killed a pigeon and there was Broad's face, Watson's front pad, Sir Ravi Jadeja and, Trott's fault. They've all become part of cricket culture as social media becomes the way we watch cricket together. And as a part-time cricket memeologist, I could see why Bendunkistan would be meme-worthy. And I'm not talking about that time his local paper compared him to a crocodile. I mean, he does field in a coloured floppy hat that he sometimes uses a chin strap for. But it could also be for this. And it's worth looking at this. This is magnificent. It's as if he's trying to hit the ball straight up, like he's going for hang time, not distance. Oh, and these two. It's like he's seen a UFO on top of the ground. This isn't the reason that Ben Dunk becomes a meme, but Ben Dunk does have the ability to get himself into the most beautifully horrendous shapes of any cricketer. Shapes that did not exist in the old days of cricket. Oh, and now a dab. This is a squat slap, floating in midair, bat facing the wrong way. And all these kind of shapes and shots, they happen a lot. Where he's trying to hit the ball and where the ball goes aren't always linked. It's not that edges are new or skied balls or even slogs, but it's how regular he is in all these positions. Because he's no longer a classical batsman, he's a T20 hitter who tries to game the field, and that means you look different. But none of these are why he became a meme. That was because Chadwick Walton almost filleted him on the cricket field, and Ben Dunk kinda looked perplexed. And because he blew bubblegum, chin strap, shot straight up in the air. If the world was just, he'd have his own fragrance and rap album. Ben Dunk's name is almost a meme. He's a walking onomatopoeia. Ben Dunk. What does Ben do? Ben Dunk! But let's go back to cricket for a moment. Ben Dunk is an opener who keeps. Except, I'm not 100% sure he should be either. Ben Dunk is not that good against pace. He's far below average. Now for all the spin that they bowl in power play, there's still a lot more pace. So he averaged 13 less against seam compared to an average opener. Now, an average opener isn't even travelling around the world, or at least he shouldn't be, but Ben Dunk comes into his own against spin where most openers struggle. A clear run over is huge, and especially as he's averaging more as well. But Ben Dunk would face more spin if he batted at number 3 or number 4, and less pace. And because of his power, he could still find boundaries with the field up. And also, the absolute easiest thing in T20 cricket is to find an opening batsman. Every good striker can open the batting. Most teams have 3 or 4 in their lineup. Teams keep picking them because they end up with the most runs. It's the absolute best place to bat. And Ben Dunk's record as an opener is not bad. His record is almost identical to that of an average opener. And average ain't bad. Here, let me steal from something I did earlier. I'd suggest that being average in cricket puts you in the top 30%, and that's really good. So in this case, average ain't average. But you can probably find someone else in your squad to do that role, and you shouldn't be picking him as your overseas player. But as a number 4 who can really score fast against spin, well, now you're talking. Advanced metrics that Amal Desai and I have been working on suggest that Ben Dunk is a slightly above average player, offering his team 0.4 of a run more per innings than an average player. But that's all from spin, where he's worth 0.7 runs an innings more. Against pace, he's in the negative. There are no real metrics for Ben Dunk's wicketkeeping, or anyone's. In 136 matches, he's kept 42% of the time. So he's more than just a part-timer, but obviously nowhere near a specialist. Now I have theories that he's not a great keeper, and I'm basing it on 2 things. The fact that he's only kept 42% of the time is one, and the fact I've seen him make a lot of errors when I've watched him is another. But I also thought we should be a little bit scientific. This list at least gives us a sciencey feel. On the right is percentage of byes let through per 100 balls for keepers who have taken 1,000 deliveries behind the stumps. But let's go down a little bit lower. Keep going. Almost there. Alright, found him. At 10th worst per byes conceded for 100 balls is Ben Dunk. Does this say unequivocally that he is a poor keeper? No. But he has kept to 4,000 balls. That is a very fair sample size. If you just look at him against spin, he's the 4th worst. And that's his problem. You can kind of see that players who have kept to over 4,000 T20 balls, they kind of follow a pattern from good to less good. But Ben Dunk does not. I'm not saying he's not a wicketkeeper. The algorithm is. Now, if you think I've painted a picture that Ben Dunk isn't that good, well, you need to know about something in Australia we call a ute. So a ute is really a car or small truck, and it's short for utility. That is what Ben Dunk brings. He's a solid option that can do a lot of things for you. I mean, the man even has 2 wickets, but they are Darcy Short and Luke Wright. He can wicket keep, not great, but enough to give you flexibility or a backup, and with his skills he can pretty much bat everywhere from 1 to 7. When you are putting together a squad, that kind of utility is actually very handy. But here's the weird thing, most teams don't think of this, which is why even though he can hit spin and take the gloves, he actually didn't play for any overseas franchise in 2015, 16, 17, and 18. In that period, Ben Dunk played for the Adelaide Strikers and had his best ever Big Bash season. And the only offer he got was to play for a second 11 Australian team while the main team were in another country about to play a test. So what happened? He was still the same Ben Dunk, loving spin, opening the batting, he kept in some games but not in others. What had changed is the hype had cooled, and suddenly the exact amount of out-of-nowhere runs as before didn't move the needle at all. This really annoys me. Ben Dunk clearly got promoted before we knew much about him, and in 2014 he played in a lot of franchises because of it. But now he was better, and no one cared. Runs are what we played this game with, and yet too often they aren't even looked at. Ben Dunk should have got a franchise job offer that year. Maybe not a big one, but certainly a single opportunity. You are supposed to be rewarded for good work, not hype, not small sample sizes. Ben Dunk did the work, he pulled himself up after 2 embarrassing years, proved he was no fluke, and he was even better than before. And you know what happened the following year? Darcy Short, Ben Dunk's replacement at Hobart, had a great season. A high dunk kind of year. And because of that season, he would be selected in the IPL, the CPL, and for Australia on the back of it. It was uncanny. The people who ran T20 had learnt nothing. They made the exact same decisions as they did before. If you think the players have no patience because of T20, then what about the administrators, the coaches, the managers, the owners? That lot is literally looking for shiny objects all the time. Darcy Short was shiny. Ben Dunk had dulled. But there is one thing he is truly great at. This is a graph of all the players who faced over 100 balls of left-arm finger spin in the last 3 years. This is the guys who struggle against it. This is where normal batsmen can be found. This is where batsmen who don't get dismissed land. And wait, any minute, okay. And this is where the king sits. He nearly averages 60 against it while scoring at more than 2 runs a ball. But if we're being honest, I think we can find another graph that shows this better. Here he is against off spin. He's a left-hander, so I suppose that's fair enough. He's also not great against leg spin, which is weirder, but we'll allow it. Left arm seam is not completely his thing either. And left arm wrist spin, well, this doesn't matter as there's only about 7 of them in the world, so let's move on. But here he is against right arm seam. Now this is around 50% of all T20 balls, so being decent against this is good. But holy shitting balls. Here he is against left arm finger spin. I mean, he's a different species of, he's not even a carbon-based life form. And here's another graph, because why not at this point? Showing how great he is against one kind of bowling, how okay he is against another kind of bowling, and how utterly terrible he is against the others. This kind of split happens a lot, but it's never this dramatic. Batsmen usually aren't the best against one type of bowling, average against right arm seam, and then dire against everything else. But the general pattern does exist in T20 cricket. Very few players are average against everything, for instance. But no player in the world in the last 3 years has been more dominant against one type of bowling than Ben Dunk is. Not Chris Gayle against leg spin, not Andre Russell against right arm seam, not no one, no how. If T20 was a major sport run correctly, Ben Dunk would be on the bench for a team in every major league, waiting to play a side with 2 left arm finger spinners in it. But until recently, fans had never even mentioned this. T20 is so amateur and slapshot that we haven't even honoured our greatest ever specialist, the king of left arm spin. But that's not all that's amateur in T20 cricket. In 2019, after 5 years not on the overseas circuit, suddenly Ben Dunk was with the Karachi Kings. Which is weird, being that the 2 years before his selection, he didn't find many runs. And when he did, they were at home. Home mostly being the MCG, but also, for his top score, Moe. So Karachi Kings hired a batsman who for 2 years basically made no runs, and made no runs slowly, who was about to go a long way from his beloved Victorian pitches to play very much away. Think about this. By most metrics, the PSL looks like a better league than the Big Bash. And here is a player who had struggled for 2 straight years in the Big Bash. Would that happen if he wasn't Australian? Obviously not. For Karachi, he batted 7 times, he passed 20 in 1 of them, but he was handy in 2 of his 7 innings. But whether it worked or not, it was one of the worst signings on paper I have ever seen. So let's update those numbers from before. He's still every bit as good, bad or otherwise as he was before Karachi took a huge chance on him, and now the Nelson Bay Giants have taken another chance on him. And finally he finds some runs. Now whether it worked or not, it is one of the worst signings on paper I have ever seen. No, that isn't a repeat, I'm saying it again, because Nelson Bay's decision makes no more sense than Karachi's did. And then Ben Dunk goes back to Melbourne, plays 1 less game than he did in the Menzansi League, and makes 320 less runs. The tournaments are 7 days apart. And then on the back of some of the worst form in Big Bash history, one knock for Karachi and a storming Giants season, he goes back to the PSL with Lahore, and there he went cocoa banana smoothies all over the place. So in this innings, Ben Dunk faced 43 balls, 35 of them were from non-left arm finger spin. He did pretty well against that. 7 were from left arm finger spin. 5 days later, he played another innings. There he faced 8 balls from young Umar Khan and 6 balls from Pakistan player and franchise guy Imad Wasim. Yes, he hit a 6 every second ball against them. So a team with all the same data I had, who had seen Ben Dunk destroy left arm's finger spin a few days before. Oh, can we just scroll back up the scorecard for a minute and see what team that... wow. He had played there the previous year. They already knew what he liked. A week earlier, he had smashed this thing everywhere. They should have known. But that's not how T20 works. Ben Dunk was picked for this year's CPL for St Kitts and Nevis, and he didn't make many runs, and he didn't make them slowly. But it seems for now, at least in the short term, he is back on the circuit. But let's just break all this down year by year, because even though cricket doesn't work like that, T20 doesn't work anyway, as I think I have proven. So for the first few years he was breaking through, and then he did this in 2014, and everyone wanted him. And then no one outside of Australia wanted him in 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. And then in 2019 he was wanted again, and this year it's been 2 so far. And in that time he's probably kept more than he should have. Batted too high up the order, too often, been involved in one of the most lopsided trades in history, become a meme, and then selected twice with no evidence that he was making any runs whatsoever. Yeah, T20 is wild. But here's the really wild thing. I'm like one of 7 people to notice, and that's only because I am obsessed with Ben Dunk. I was in 2016, and in 2018, and now, and even like right now. I met Ben Dunk once too. I was at a pub in Melbourne with a friend of his, and he came over to say hi. We shook hands. I felt awkward because, you know, all the obsession type stuff. But our mutual friend said, nah, don't worry, he doesn't know who the hell you are. And I felt better. But then I felt bad because maybe no one would ever notice Ben Dunk like I did. And then a year later, see this year right here? I was the Melbourne Stars analyst. I was legally stalking him. I was professionally stalking him. And so now I, and apparently now you, know more about Ben Dunk than pretty much anyone on this planet, perhaps including Ben Dunk. So what have I seen? Dazzling heights, loads of sixes, incredible bouts of mediocrity, endless travel, nonsensical off-field calls. We've had it all. This is the story of Ben Dunk and, I suppose, T20 cricket. Sometimes you just have to sit back and marvel at the madness of it all.